The invitation to my ex-fiance's engagement party arrived with my name spelled wrong and a seating assignment at table 13 next to the kitchen doors. That wasn't a mistake. Vivian Cross did not make mistakes. She made statements, and the statement was, "Come watch me marry your replacement and sit where the waiters can step on you." The old me would have burned the invitation. But 3 days ago, at the lowest moment of my life, a blue screen appeared in front of my eyes, and everything changed. It called itself the dividend system, and it had exactly one rule. Humiliation pays, not metaphorically. Literally, every insult, every sneer, every public moment of disrespect aimed at me would be appraised, valued, and converted into assets. And there was a detail in the fine print that made my hands shake the first time I read it. The system did not pay me from nowhere. It paid me from the insulter. Every humiliation was source tagged. Whoever disrespected me would have the payout quietly carved out of their own holdings, their company, their family fortune, their name. In simple terms, anyone who mocked me was selling me pieces of their own life, and they would never see the receipt. So no, I did not burn the invitation. I ironed my cheapest shirt, I practiced looking sad in the mirror, and I walked into the Grandview Hotel like a man attending his own funeral. Inside, I was attending an auction, and everyone on the guest list was inventory. The doorman stopped me at the entrance. He looked at my shoes first, then my invitation, then my shoes again, like the shoes had committed a crime and the invitation was lying to protect them. "Staff entrance is around the back," he said. "I'm a guest," I said. "Ethan Ward." He checked the list slowly, with the face of a man hoping the list would agree with him. It didn't. He sighed, stepped aside, and muttered just loud enough for the valet line to hear. They really let anyone in now. A soft chime rang in my skull. A blue window opened. Public disrespect detected. Witnesses 11. Appraised value $100,000. Source employed party. Payout drawn from gratuity pool. Reward issued. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. I already knew what it said. $100,000. Deposited clean. I had been inside the building for 9 seconds. I lowered my head, mumbled an apology to a man who had just unknowingly tipped me $100,000, and shuffled toward the coat check. The young woman behind the counter took one look at my jacket and didn't bother hiding her opinion of it. "We have a charity drop box by the side door," she said, "if you're done with that." I handed her my coat anyway. She held it between 2 fingers, the way Vivian would later hold my gift, and a man in line behind me snorted. "Careful," he told her. Loud and grinning, might be the nicest thing he owns. Wouldn't want to lose it, his date laughed into her champagne. Stacked public disrespect detected. Witnesses 7. Source guest party. Source assets modest. Cash dividend issued $200,000. Total cash $300,000. I took my coat check ticket and thanked her quietly, like a man grateful for any kindness at all. The system, which by now I understood had a sense of humor drier than the champagne, added a note. Observation: the man who insulted you is leveraged on 3 credit lines and will require your bank within the year. Consider him a future tenant. I tucked that away with everything else and shuffled into the ballroom looking appropriately crushed. The system hummed with approval. Poverty performance rating, B+. The shoulder slump is convincing. Maintain it. It grated me. That was the part nobody could have warned me about. The system did not just pay for humiliation. It judged my acting like a theater critic with a gambling problem. Looked too happy, and rewards got clawed back. Looked too theatrical, and it docked me for overacting. It wanted authentic, organic, free-range suffering. So I gave it the performance of my life. Because the audience in that ballroom was worth more than any audience on earth. The Grandview's Grand Ballroom had been transformed into a monument to the Cross family's money, ice sculptures, a champagne tower taller than my apartment ceiling. 400 guests in clothes that cost more than cars, all gathered to celebrate the engagement of Vivian Cross, heiress of Cross Industries, to Preston Hale, founder of Hale Dynamics, the self-made genius of the year. Self-made. I'd known Preston since college. The only thing Preston had ever made himself was a reservation. I found table 13, exactly where the invitation promised, wedged against the kitchen doors, decorated with the flowers from yesterday's event. A waiter came through the doors and clipped my chair with his hip. He didn't apologize. He looked at my table number, understood everything, and decided I wasn't worth the breath. Casual disrespect detected. Witnesses 3. Appraised value $150,000. Reward issued. Cash dividend issued $150,000. Total cash $450,000. I had been seated for under a minute. I unfolded my napkin like a man trying very hard to be invisible, and I waited, because the real money hadn't even noticed me yet. It noticed me 4 minutes later. Oh my God, he actually came. Vivian's voice carried across the ballroom the way only old money carries, soft enough to seem polite, loud enough to reach every table that mattered. The crowd parted, and there she was. White dress, diamond choker, and the smile she wore for charity galas, the one that never reached her eyes. 5 years. 5 years I had spent with this woman, back when her family's company was bleeding and mine was the shoulder she cried on. Then Cross Industries recovered, and Preston Hale appeared with his startup and his slick confidence, and I received my exit interview from the relationship in a text message that started with the words, "Be reasonable." "Ethan," she said, gliding toward table 13, with Preston on her arm and half the ballroom following at a polite distance. "I'm so glad you could make it. I worried the invitation might upset you." "It was kind of you to send it," I said quietly. "It was Preston's idea," she said, patting his arm. "He said closure is healthy. He's thoughtful like that." Preston Hale smiled down at me. He was tall in the way gym memberships and good lighting make men tall, and he wore his tuxedo like a press release. "No hard feelings, Ethan," he said warmly, extending a hand. "The better man simply won. It happens." The nearest tables chuckled. Layered public insult detected. Witnesses 60 plus. Source Preston Hale. Appraisal in progress. And then the system did the thing that still made my heart skip. Source assets identified. Hale Dynamics, private valuation $2.1 billion. Converting humiliation dividend. Acquiring 2% of Hale Dynamics through Shell Instruments. Acquisition complete. Current position 2%. 2% of his company. Because he'd called himself the better man at a party. Preston Hale had just been charged $42 million for one sentence, and the only receipt was the blue light in my eyes that nobody else could see. I shook his hand. "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it with every cell in my body, because Preston Hale was about to congratulate himself directly into my portfolio all night long. "You brought a gift," Vivian said, noticing the small wooden case by my plate. It wasn't a question. It was an opening statement to a jury. "It's nothing big," I said. "Clearly," Preston said, and the laughter came faster this time. Vivian picked up the case with 2 fingers, the way you'd pick up something a cat left on the porch. She opened it, and her perfect eyebrows performed perfect confusion. "A watch?" she said. "An old watch?" "It's restored," I said. "I did the work myself. Took most of a year. You restored a used watch for my engagement." She said each word like she was reading a diagnosis. Then she laughed, bright and silver, and turned to the crowd. "He restored a used watch." The ballroom laughed with her. 400 people, give or take, laughing in waves, the sound bouncing off the ice sculptures. What Vivian did not do, what she had not done in 5 years, was look closely at anything I gave her. If she had, she might have noticed the engraving on the case back. She might have remembered where she'd seen this watch before, but that reveal wasn't mine to spend yet. Some assets you hold. She dropped the case onto a passing dessert trolley like it was an empty glass. "Someone deal with that," she said. Major public humiliation detected. Witnesses 400 plus. Source Vivian Cross. Source assets identified. Cross Industries Family Holding Company. Acquiring 3% of Cross Industries. Acquisition complete. Current position 3%. Then a second chime. Softer. Almost smug. Cash dividend issued for destruction of personal gift. $750,000. Total cash, $1.2 million. I stood in the middle of 400 laughing people, more than $1 million richer than I'd been at breakfast, holding 3% of the family that had thrown me away, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep my face in character. The system noticed. Warning, mouth corner elevation at 6%. Maximum permitted, 4%. Composure tax will apply. Composure tax. It would fine me for smiling. I thought about my empty apartment and my pawned guitar, and my face fell back into approved misery. Smile suppressed. Performance rating, A-. Excellent recovery. Somewhere behind me, the dessert trolley rolled away with a year of my work on it. That was fine. I knew exactly which staff member would set it aside, because by the end of tonight, I intended to know everything that happened in this building. I just didn't know yet how literally the system would arrange that. Preston wasn't finished. Men like Preston are never finished. "They're just reloading." He raised his hand, and a hush moved through the ballroom, because Preston Hale had trained these people the way you train dogs with spectacle. Two staff members wheeled in a velvet display stand. On it sat a polished model of a yacht, and beside the model, a single golden key on a cushion. Vivian, Preston announced, your real gift is anchored in the marina. 80 feet. I named her after you. The ballroom lost its mind. Applause, camera flashes, two distinct gasps from the champagne tower. Vivian's hands flew to her mouth in the universal gesture of women who already knew about the gift. Now that, said a silver-haired man beside me at the dessert table, is what a gift looks like. Some men give watches, some men give ships. He wasn't even talking to me. He was talking about me, in front of me, to nobody. That's a special category of insult, and apparently the system agreed. Comparative humiliation detected. Witnesses, 400 plus. Multiple sources distributed. Cash dividend issued, $1 million. Total cash, $2.2 million. I watched Preston soak in the applause, and I ran the math the system had taught me to run. The yacht was a flex. The flex was a loan. Everything about Preston was leveraged. His company, his image, probably his teeth, and tonight he was spending borrowed shine to buy a room's worship. Meanwhile, every time the room worshipped him at my expense, I bought a little more of everything he actually owned. Look at him, someone whispered behind me. He's just standing there. You think he understands what he lost? I lowered my eyes and let my shoulders sag another inch. I understood exactly what I'd lost. About one comment ago, Preston had lost $42 million, and he was currently losing the marina fees too. Vivian appeared at my elbow with a champagne flute she had no intention of giving me. Up close, her perfume was the same one I'd bought her in our second year. The one she'd said was too cheap to wear, apparently rebranded by her new life. You don't belong here, Ethan, she said softly. You know that, right? I waited for the chime. Nothing. I blinked. The system window unfolded with what I can only describe as bureaucratic boredom. Repeated insult detected. The phrase, you don't belong here, has been used against hosts 31 times this calendar year. Insult depreciated. Current value, $0. Please encourage fresher material. 31 times. The system kept a scoreboard of my pain, and Vivian had been so lazy, so repetitive in her cruelty, that her insults had depreciated like a used car. She was mocking me in a dead currency. This was a problem. I was standing across from one of the richest sources in the building, and she was paying me in expired coupons. I needed fresh humiliation, premium grade, and I knew exactly which vending machine in this ballroom dispensed it. I glanced past her shoulder at Preston, who was watching us with the alert stillness of a man who didn't like his fiancée standing near her past. Come on, Preston, be yourself. He was already walking over. Everything all right over here? Preston said, sliding an arm around Vivian's waist and aiming his smile at me like a spotlight. Ethan, you're not making my fiancée uncomfortable, are you, on her big night? He was just leaving, Vivian said. He just got here, Preston said, and his smile widened because he'd spotted an opportunity to perform generosity, which is the most expensive thing a man like Preston buys. No, stay, Ethan. Eat. Honestly, when's the last time you had a real meal on me? The tables around us laughed on cue. Disguised humiliation detected. Charity framing identified. Witnesses 40 plus. Source Preston Hale, acquiring 1.5% of Hale Dynamics. Current position 3.5%. The system added a note, and I swear it sounded impressed. Premium insult quality. Charity wrapping increases appraisal by 40%. The victim looks generous while the host looks destitute. Well-constructed encourage repetition. So I did the only thing a man farming a billionaire could do. I made myself look hungry. Thank you, I said quietly, staring at the floor. That's generous. Preston ate it up. Generosity is a drug, and an audience is the needle. It's no problem, man, he said, loud, expansive, waving a hand. Look, I get it. Not everyone can build something. Some people are founders. Some people are background. There's no shame in being background, Ethan. The laughter rolled. Source, Preston Hale. Acquiring 2% of Hale Dynamics. Current position, 5.5%. 5.5%. Preston had a habit I was learning. He couldn't insult me just once. He stacked them, building little monuments to his own superiority, and every brick was a board vote I now controlled. A woman in emerald green leaned toward her husband. He's not even defending himself. How does someone have that little pride? I have an enormous amount of pride, madam. I have simply discovered it pays less than humiliation. Vivian, watching Preston bask, felt the attention drift away from her on her own engagement night, and Vivian Cross had never in her life tolerated being the second most important person in a room. Preston, stop wasting your kindness, she said sharply. He'll just take it. He always took everything I offered and gave back trinkets. She turned to the watching crowd, performing the wronged woman. 5 years. 5 years I carried him. Do you know he once gave me a birthday card he made himself? A card. While I was running a division, fresh humiliation detected. New material. Witnesses 400 plus. Source Vivian Cross. Acquiring 3% of Cross Industries. Current position 6%. There it was. The moment she stopped recycling and said something new, the register rang. 6% of Cross Industries because she couldn't stand to share a spotlight. But something else happened when she mentioned the card. A flicker, for just a second, Vivian's eyes went somewhere far away, to a version of her that had kept that card. Maybe in a version of her life she'd traded in. Then the flicker died, and the charity gala smile came back. I filed it away. People always think the hardest part of revenge is the money. It isn't. The money is just the system. The hard part is the moment you realize the person who threw you away occasionally remembers you were worth keeping, and you have to decide whether that matters. It didn't. Not yet. I had shares to acquire. My phone buzzed against my leg. Not the deposit buzz, a different one. A call. I stepped back from the table into the shadow of a pillar and answered low. Mr. Ward? A woman's voice, careful and quiet. My name is Renata. I'm a junior officer in the registrar's office. I'm not supposed to be calling you. Then why are you? I said. Because in 11 years, I have never watched a man acquire 6% of a holding company in a single hour through clean shell instruments, and the filings list a private party at the Grand View as the event location. A pause. I pulled the venue guest list. You're seated at table 13 by the kitchen. I said nothing. Across the room, Vivian was laughing at something, Preston said, her diamond choker throwing little knives of light. I don't know what you are, Renata said, but the partners here will notice what I noticed by Monday. When they do, they will try to freeze the instruments and bury you in review. If you intend to do something, do it tonight in public where they cannot quietly undo it. Another pause, and her voice dropped further. 5 years ago, your bridge loan saved Cross Industries, and they wrote you out of the record. I processed the amendment. I always thought it was the ugliest thing I ever filed. The system stirred, Ali identified. Renata, Registrar's Office. Motive, conscience, no insult present, no reward issued. Note, not everyone in your story is a source. Some are witnesses who chose a side. I watched the ballroom glitter and rot in front of me. Stay near your phone tonight, I told her. When I call back, file fast. Yes, Mr. Ward. I hung up, and I let the sad mask settle back over my face, because Preston was already lining up his next performance, and the clock Renata had just started was ticking under everything now. A new voice entered the conversation, and the temperature of the room dropped 10 degrees. What a touching speech, Vivian. Did your assistant write it, or did you manage this one yourself? Heads turned. A woman crossed the ballroom with the unhurried confidence of someone who owned the floor she walked on, which I would later learn she partly did. Black dress, no jewelry, the kind of beauty that makes expensive people nervous. She stopped a few feet away and looked at Vivian with open, elegant contempt. Daniela Voss, Vivian said, and her voice tightened around the name. I didn't realize you were invited. I own 12% of the company catering this party. Daniela said pleasantly, I invited myself. I wanted to see the famous engagement. Her eyes moved to me, and I felt a spike of pure dread. No, do not defend me. Defense kills humiliation. Defense is a stock buyback at the worst possible time, and I have to say, Daniela continued, her gaze sliding back to Vivian, I've never seen a woman work so hard to humiliate a man who's just sitting quietly. It almost looks like guilt. The crowd inhaled. My system flashed yellow. Warning, third-party intervention detected. Sympathy vector forming. If host becomes object of admiration, reward environment will destabilize. Recommended action remain pathetic. I remained pathetic with everything I had. I shrank in my chair. I stared at my hands. I became the saddest piece of furniture in the Grandview Hotel. Vivian's face went pink. This is my engagement party, Daniela. It is. Daniela agreed. I'm simply admiring the decorations, particularly that one. She nodded at me without cruelty, which was the dangerous part. He restored a watch by hand, and you threw it on a dessert cart. Some women would be touched. You were embarrassed. That tells me the room's judgment began slowly to turn. I could feel it shifting, like a tide deciding to come in, and the tide was carrying my profits out to sea. Sympathy level rising, the system warned. Humiliation density dropping. Reward generation paused. I had to act. I had to drag the room's contempt back onto me before Daniela Voss accidentally made me sympathetic and bankrupted my evening. So I spoke up in the smallest, most broken voice I could manufacture. "It's okay," I said. "She's right that I never measured up. I knew that the whole time, I just didn't want to admit it." The ballroom went quiet. Vivian blinked. Daniela's sharp eyes sharpened further, fixing on me with sudden, uncomfortable focus. Self-deprecation accepted. Sympathy vector collapsed. Humiliation density restored. Reward generation resumed. I almost sighed with relief. I had just talked myself out of being respected, which in my new life was the most expensive mistake a man could make, and I dodged it. But Daniela kept staring at me. And when she spoke again, it was very quiet just for me, under the returning noise of the crowd. "You're not broken at all," she murmured. "You're working. I don't know what you're doing yet, but I'm going to find out." I kept my face slack and sad. Inside, an alarm I couldn't switch off had started ringing. Because Daniela Voss was the first person in 5 years to look at me and see the man instead of the disappointment. And the system, which loved my humiliation, had just told me that her admiration could cost me everything. One source in the room paid me to be hated. One person in the room had decided to understand me, and I was going to have to keep them from ever comparing notes. Preston, oblivious as a man can be while standing at the center of his own party, clapped his hands. "All right, enough heavy talk. We've got a program to run." He grinned at me. "Ethan, you'll love this part. There's a slideshow." There was, in fact, a slideshow, and it was about to hand me the keys to the building. Literally. The lights dimmed. A screen descended behind the champagne tower, and Preston Hale, founder of Hale Dynamics, began narrating a slideshow of his own greatness to 400 people who'd already heard it. The Cross Industries logo appeared first, then the Hale Dynamics logo, then both logos merging into one, with a heart between them. The crowd cooed when Cross Industries was struggling a few years back. Preston narrated, "Some people stood by Vivian, and some people," he paused, and the spotlight, by no accident at all, drifted toward table 13. "Some people just weren't built to carry that kind of weight. No shame in it. But that's when I stepped in. That's when Hale Dynamics partnered with Cross, and the rest is history. Our history." The room applauded the rewriting of my entire life. Here's what the slideshow left out. When Cross Industries was struggling, the person who stood by Vivian was me. I emptied my savings into a bridge loan that kept her family's company breathing for one critical quarter. There was no contract. There was a promise and a woman crying on my shoulder, and a younger man stupid enough to believe love was collapsing. Preston didn't step in until the company was already saved and the credit was available to steal. I never told anyone, because what's the point of a receipt no one will honor? But the system, it turned out, honored everything. Historical fraud detected. Hosts uncredited capital contribution to Cross Industries located in financial records. Statute active, converting unacknowledged debt. Reward issued 8% of Cross Industries. Current position 14%. I sat up very slightly in the dark. 14%? The slideshow that erased me had just paid me back the company I'd quietly saved, with interest, because the system could read the books even when the people couldn't. Preston clicked to the next slide. A photo of the Grandview Hotel filled the screen. "And tonight," he said grandly, "we celebrate in a venue that means a lot to us." The Grandview, did you know Hale Dynamics holds the master lease on this entire property? When you're successful, the world becomes yours to borrow. Master lease. Held by Hale Dynamics, of which I now own 5.5%. The room I was being humiliated in was, in a small but legally real sense, partly mine. The system clearly found this funny note. Host now holds partial economic interest in the venue of his own humiliation. Irony bonus issued. $500,000. Total cash. $2.7 million. I pressed my napkin to my mouth to hide a face that was no longer obeying orders. The slideshow mercifully ended. The lights came up, and dinner was served, which meant the sharks had to sit down, which meant for the next hour they would be within arm's reach of table 13, bored, fed, and looking for entertainment. I was the entertainment. I was also the auction floor. They just didn't know they'd registered to bid. The first to wander over was a heavy-set man with a gold watch the size of a doorknob who lowered himself into the empty chair beside me without asking. Marcus Reed. I knew the name from the business pages, a real estate developer who'd bought his way onto the Cross Industries board 2 years ago and never let anyone forget the price of his seat. "You're the ex," Marcus said, chewing. "Vivian's little charity case. I heard about you." He looked me over like an appraiser pricing a teardown. "Word of advice, son. A man who can't hold on to a woman like that was never gonna hold on to anything. Cut your losses. Crawl home." The tables nearby leaned in to enjoy it. Public contempt detected. Witnesses 20 plus. Source Marcus Reed. Source assets Reed Development plus board equity in Cross Industries. Acquiring 1% of Cross Industries from Source Holdings. Current position in Cross Industries 15%. A second note followed, and it tagged him the way a hunter tags a deer. Source flagged for continued processing. Marcus Reed added to active list outstanding board equity vulnerable. Recommend cultivation. "That's good advice," I told Marcus quietly. "Thank you." "Course it is," he said, pleased, and clapped me on the back hard enough to sting. No charge, no charge. He'd just sold me a piece of his board seat for the pleasure of slapping my back, and he walked away believing he'd done me a favor. I added his name to the list the system was keeping, the list I was beginning to think of as a menu. The second one didn't sit. She circled, a sharp woman in silver, Priya Anand, who ran the investment fund that had bought into Hale Dynamics during its last raise. She'd spent the dinner watching me with the cold curiosity of someone who could smell that something didn't add up, and couldn't place what. "You're very calm," Priya said, stopping behind my chair, for a man being buried alive in public. "Most men in your position would have left, or wept. You're just sitting, eating Vivian salmon. It's almost rude." "I didn't want to make a scene," I said. "No," she said slowly. "You didn't, did you?" She tilted her head. "I don't trust calm men at parties built to break them. I'm going to keep my eye on you, charity case." She said it like a dismissal. The crowd heard it like one and laughed. Suspicious public dismissal detected. Witnesses 15. Source Priya Anand. Source assets Anand Capital. Holding position in Hale Dynamics. Acquiring 1% of Hale Dynamics from Source Fund. Current position in Hale Dynamics 6.5%. The system added, almost a warning, "Note, this source is intelligent. She insults you while studying you. She is the most dangerous name processed tonight, and the most valuable. Her fund is overexposed to Hale Dynamics. If Hale falls, she falls with it. Handle in a later chapter." Priya Anand walked away, and I let myself memorize the exact shape of her suspicion, because the system was right. The cruel ones were easy. The smart ones were the ones who'd eventually figure out the trick, and she'd just put herself first in line to try. The third came wrapped as kindness, which is always the most expensive wrapping. An older woman, elegant, silver-haired, settled into the chair. Marcus had left warm. Eleanor Cross. Vivian's aunt and the family's quiet power. The one who'd actually run Cross Industries through the hard quarter. My money had paid for. She'd never been cruel to me. She'd simply never seen me, which is its own kind of wound. "Ethan?" she said gently, and the gentleness was real, which made what came next worse. "I always liked you were a sweet boy." That was rather the problem. Sweet boys don't survive families like ours. Vivian needed someone with teeth. It isn't an insult, it's just the truth, and I think you've always known it. The tables around us made the soft, sympathetic sound a crowd makes when cruelty wears good manners. Disguised humiliation detected. Affection framing identified. Witnesses 30 plus. Source Eleanor Cross. Appraisal multiplier increased by sincerity of source. Acquiring 2% of Cross Industries. Current position in Cross Industries 17%. 17% and climbing, and the woman who just told me I had no teeth had paid for the observation out of the company she loved more than her niece. "You're probably right," I said softly to Eleanor, and I let her pat my hand and rise and drift back to her table, satisfied that she'd been kind to the help. She would be, I suspected, the hardest name on the list when I reached it. Not because she was powerful, because part of me believed her. I sat at table 13 with my untouched salmon and watched them rotate through, one after another, each one stopping to wipe their shoes on me, each one walking away a little poorer in ways they wouldn't discover until the filings cleared. Marcus Priya, Eleanor, the man from the coat check who toasted in my direction with a smirk, a junior Hale executive who repeated Preston's background line as though he'd invented it and donated 0.5% for the privilege. By the time the plates were cleared, the system had processed a dozen sources, and the list of names it was keeping had grown long enough that it had started numbering them. And then Preston, riding the high of his own highlight reel, made the mistake that men like Preston always make. He decided the night needed one more act of dominance to be complete. He picked up a microphone before dinner. He announced, "I want to do something special. Ethan, my man, come up here." The room turned to look at table 13. My stomach dropped, and not in a good way, because I couldn't see the play yet, and the system hadn't told me the value. "Come on, don't be shy," Preston said, waving me up with the microphone. "I want to give you a moment, a chance to say a few words. Wish the happy couple well. Closure, right? Be a man about it." It was a trap. Obviously, it was a trap. He wanted me at the front of the room with a microphone so the whole crowd could watch me stammer, congratulate the woman who left me and the man who took her, and complete my own humiliation in my own voice, the perfect ending to his perfect night. Vivian smiled, delighted. Daniela Voss, off to the side, went very still, watching me the way you watch a cliff diver. I stood, I shuffled to the front. My hands shook as I took the microphone, and the shaking was real, because the system was screaming numbers I could barely process. Maximum humiliation event forming. Self-administered public humiliation carries highest appraisal multiplier in the system. Witnesses 400 plus. Combined sources Vivian Cross and Preston Hale. Potential reward, controlling interest threshold approaching. Condition host must complete the humiliation sincerely, with no visible awareness of gain. Controlling interest threshold. Those words sat in my vision and glowed. I looked out at 400 faces waiting to watch me grovel. I looked at Vivian, radiant and cruel. I looked at Preston, holding his own engagement hostage to his ego. And I understood that the toast they wanted me to give was the most expensive sentence I would ever speak, and they were forcing me to speak it. I let my voice tremble. I made it small. I made it sincere. I don't have your gift for speeches, Preston, I said. The crowd chuckled, warm and pitying. Good, keep pitying. Pity is the discount rack, but it still rings up. Vivian and I were together a long time, and I gave her everything I had. It just turned out everything I had wasn't worth very much. The room went soft and sad. A few people actually winced. Vivian's smile flickered. Sincere self-humiliation registering. Appraisal climbing. I used to think loyalty was worth something. I continued, my voice cracking on cue, though the crack was the only fake part left. I gave this family my savings once when things were hard. Quietly, I never asked for credit. I thought that's what you do for people you love. I felt the room shift. I felt Vivian go rigid. I felt Daniela's eyes burn into the side of my head. And I felt the system reach the number it had been climbing toward all night. Sincere public self-humiliation completed. Uncredited loyalty disclosed without demand for credit. Maximum authenticity multiplier achieved. Reward issued. 34% of cross-industries. Current position in cross-industries, 51%. Controlling interest acquired. The blue light filled my whole vision, and for 1 second the entire ballroom seemed to freeze around me. 400 people suspended in the exact moment they thought they were watching me lose. I lowered the microphone. I wiped my eye for the performance because the system was still grading, and the grade was the only thing left that mattered. Anyway, I said softly, "Congratulations. I hope you two build something that lasts." The room exhaled into applause. Warm, relieved, pitying applause. The kind you give a man who has finally accepted his place. Vivian dabbed at her eyes, moved by her own victory. Preston put a hand on my shoulder, and to the crowd it looked like mercy, and he leaned in close so only I could hear, and he whispered, "Good boy." Source, Preston Hale. Final insult of the evening logged, acquiring 2.5% of Hale dynamics. Current position, 8%. I let him keep his hand on my shoulder. I let 400 people applaud my defeat, and then my phone rang. In the quiet after the applause, in a ballroom that had just finished pitying me, the ringtone was very loud. Preston frowned. Vivian turned. I lifted the phone and answered it on speaker, because the system had taught me one final lesson tonight, and the lesson was that timing is its own kind of wealth. A crisp, professional voice came through, loud enough for the front tables to hear. Renata, right on time. "Mr. Ward, this is the office of the corporate registrar. I'm calling to confirm the filings completed this evening. As of 9:47, you're recorded as the majority shareholder of Cross Industries, holding 51%. You also hold a significant minority position in Hale Dynamics. Shall I notify the boards that you'll be exercising control? The microphone was still on. Preston had handed it to me, and I had never given it back, and it carried the registrar's voice into every corner of the Grandview ballroom. Nobody applauded now. Vivian's face drained from white to something paler. Preston's hand fell off my shoulder like it had been switched off. Daniela Voss began very quietly to smile. For a moment, the ballroom simply held its breath, 400 people recalculating 5 years of a man in real time. Then the recalculations started leaking out as sound. 51%, someone whispered. He owns the company. He owns her company. Is that legal? How is that legal? Did she know? She had to know. Look at her face. She didn't know. Vivian found her voice first, and it came out cracked and furious. This is a trick, she said, loud to the room, to herself. Ethan doesn't have money. He's never had money. He restored a watch. He took the bus here. Tell them. She rounded on me. Tell them this is some kind of trick. I lowered the phone from my ear. I kept my voice quiet, because quiet carried further now than her anger ever would. You spent 5 years deciding what I was worth, I said. You were just always reading the wrong number. Preston tried to gather himself the way a man gathers spilled papers in a wind. Okay, everyone. Let's all slow down. Ethan, Buddy. The Buddy was new. An hour ago, it had been background. Whatever this is, whatever you've done, we can talk. Boards take weeks to act. Months. You can't just walk in here and take everything. My phone buzzed again. Against my ear, Renata's still on the line, Mr. Ward, she said. And now her careful voice had an edge of something that sounded almost like joy. The filings are accepted. Both registries, I sent them to every board member's inbox 3 minutes ago, while they were still at their tables. You may want to look around the room. I looked around the room. At a dozen tables, phones had begun to glow. Older men in good suits, board members of Cross Industries, and Hale Dynamics scattered through the party as guests, were lifting their screens, reading, and going pale in a slow wave that moved across the ballroom like weather. One by one, they looked up from their phones, and one by one, they looked at me. Not at Vivian, not at Preston, at me, because the boards had just learned mid-dessert that the quiet man at table 13 by the kitchen doors had become the single most important person either company would ever answer to, and powerful people recalibrate their loyalty faster than any system ever could. A heavy-set shape pushed through the crowd. Marcus Reed, the man who'd told me to crawl home over the salmon, his doorknob watch catching the light, his face arranged into something he probably believed was a smile. Ethan, Marcus said warmly, hand already extended. Listen, what I said earlier, that was just party talk, you understand. Men ribbing each other, no hard feelings. We board members should stick together, eh? I've always said Cross needed fresh blood at the top. Source, Marcus Reed. Reversal flattery detected. Note, the insult has become a handshake. This is the moment the powerful reveal they were never loyal to anything but the largest number in the room. No reward issued. Flattery does not pay. Only contempt pays, and he has run out of it. I looked at Marcus Reed's outstretched hand. You told me a man who couldn't hold a woman couldn't hold anything, I said. We'll discuss your board seat on Monday. His smile fell off in pieces. Priya Anand was already moving toward the exit, phone pressed to her ear, talking fast and low, a fund manager watching her overexposed position in Hale Dynamics catch fire and trying to call the fire department before anyone else smelled smoke. She caught my eye as she went. She didn't insult me, and she didn't flatter me. She gave me one small grim nod, the nod of a smart enemy, acknowledging she'd lost the first round and was already planning the second. Her I would have to take seriously. Eleanor Cross did not rush over and did not flee. She remained at her table, hands folded, watching me with an expression that was almost pride and almost grief. The look of a woman who had told a sweet boy he had no teeth and was now watching him close his jaw around her family's company. She inclined her head a fraction. I returned it. We understood each other. That account would be settled later, and carefully. Daniela Voss crossed the floor to me through the chaos, unhurried as ever, and stopped close enough to speak under the noise. I told you I'd find out what you were doing, she said. I still don't know how, but I know what now. Her eyes searched my face, and for once there was no contempt in them at all, which the system had warned me was the dangerous kind. You let them do it to you, all night, On purpose, you stood there and let 400 people humiliate you because it was making you rich somehow. A pause. That's either the smartest thing I've ever seen, or the loneliest. I haven't decided. I had no answer the system would let me say out loud, so I said nothing, and saying nothing only made her look at me harder. Vivian was still standing where I'd left her. The termination of our engagement she dreamed of all night turned to ash in her hands, her engagement party curdling into the worst night of her family's history around her. She looked at the wooden case, now sitting, forgotten on the dessert trolley by the wall, and something moved behind her eyes. The flicker again, the girl who'd kept a handmade birthday card surfacing for one last second in the woman who'd thrown away the watch. "What was on the case?" she said suddenly, quietly. "The engraving?" I didn't look. What did it say? I almost told her. That was the thing I would have to watch in myself going forward, that some small, stupid 5-year-old part of me still wanted to tell her. "You'll have time to look?" I said instead. "You work for me now." The system chimed one final time, soft and almost proud. Day 1 complete. Total holdings controlling interest in 2 companies. Cash reserves $2.7 million. Sources processed tonight. 14. Note. 13 remain. 13. I lowered the phone and finally, for the first time all evening, I let myself stand up straight. Vivian Cross had spent 5 years believing she'd thrown me out of her life. She'd seated me by the kitchen doors to prove it. She'd thrown away my gift to seal it. She hadn't thrown me out of anything. She'd handed me the company, the man, the building, and a list of 13 more names. And we were only getting started. Next time, the first board meeting, and the first person on the list who finds out what happens when you mock a man the system is listening for.